We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Hey, welcome to Feel Good. Dang it, dang it, dang it. Rewind. Welcome to Answering the Inner Call with me, your girl, Malika Lee. If you didn't catch the previous episode, I mentioned that I was going to try to tie in a song with each episode. So, if you missed the title already, by the song, I hope that gives you a preview into who I'm going to be talking about today. So, just for context, in the previous episodes, I spent some time talking about the feminine energy. I also spent an episode, I've talked about the masculine also. We'll get more in detail with that as well. This episode, I felt like it felt appropriate to explore an example of a healthy, heart-centered, now I didn't say perfect, y'all, because I know some of the history, but a heart-centered expression of both the masculine and feminine energy. And if you don't know by the song, and if you missed the title, the person I'm going to be talking about today is Dr. Martin Luther King. So one of the things that I dig is studying transformation agents, revolutionaries, people that are just like so inspiring and about that life and living from my humble perspective to the fullest of what their soul came here to do. Dr. King being one of them. And so I've talked about the importance of the feminine energy, a healthy, because there's a shadow to both the masculine and the feminine. There's a shadow to, and also there's a heart-centered or a light-bearing side to the masculine and the feminine energy. Unfortunately, with patriarchy and toxic masculinity, we have assumed and collapsed, some of us, toxicity with masculinity. No. They are not one and the same. We just see a lot of the shadow side, and it's time for the light. Can I get an amen? I was going to say my Baptist roots were coming up, but I didn't grow up in a Baptist church that really did all that. Oh, Lord, I feel like cutting up now. Y'all didn't hear me. Okay, stay focused. What up? Shout out to Tabitha Brown. That stay focused came from her. Anyway, okay, so Dr. King and so many, if you think of people who have deeply moved you, and that would include for me personally, like Jesus, Nelson Mandela, Buddha, Frederick Douglass. I have a thing for, like I said, revolutionaries. And let me get into some of the feminine, some of the women that were about that life, like Princess Diana, Oprah Winfrey, Maya Angelou, Tina Turner, Harriet Tubman. Ooh, we about to get into Miss Harriet, honey. These, I think, are examples of the balanced, heart-centered masculine and feminine. And I'm going to get into probably do more episodes like this. I'd love to hear from you who you would like to hear about. So please, if you're feeling generous, please rate the episode or rate the podcast, as well as, put in there. I'll see it if it's on Apple Podcasts specifically, or you can reach out to me on social media. Oh, I might not see it on there if I'm keeping it 100. Okay, iTunes podcast, Apple Podcast. If there's anybody that you'd like me to take a look at that you think also represents that healthy balance, masculine and feminine, and having an episode dedicated to them. This one, like I said, we're going to get into Dr. Martin Luther the King. Okay, so his expression, and my theory is that those evolved spiritual beings, like I said, I didn't say perfect, usually have a representation of it and an expression and embodiment of both the healthy masculine and feminine. So what do I mean by that? With Dr. King specifically, his masculine energy was represented in his confidence, in his visibility of speaking out and being willing. And it takes confidence and courage to put yourself out there, especially if you are a contrarian to the status quo or what's socially acceptable at your particular time and in your particular location. As we know now, he's heralded by some. There's still some that, are feeling a certain way about that. But really what he was doing was taking America to task to live up to its ideals. Not an easy thing to do. And he didn't do it alone. He did have a team of people who we rarely hear about. Fortunately, with movies like Selma, we get to see the inner workings, at least from a creative perspective, of the many hands on deck that took the strategy and the skill to make radical changes. I think a lot of that is overlooked, unfortunately, because a lot of people are marching without the strategy. And if you study Dr. King and his work and the work of the SCLC, Southern Leadership Conference, I'm missing a letter there. But if you study their work, there was a lot of strategy that went into their work. And marching was just one small aspect of their strategy. The others were what the circumstances and what they were asking for. That's also that strategy can be a balance both of that masculine and feminine energy, right? Where you can get inspired to, and the feminine part is the inspired ideas of how to execute plans, inspired ideas of how to carry out certain tasks, or even, I can't deny, I think Dr. King, he received a call. His call showed up as being voted as the leader of the SCLC, and I don't think he wanted the position initially. And he graciously, because calls can show up as external invitations and internal invitations, he accepted that call and that vote of those people that were in the room. And, a call isn't a one-time thing. We tend to, our calls are like domino effects and set into motion other calls. So going back to the masculine, the heart-centered masculine expression, like I said, it was his courage, his confidence, his oratory skills of being seen, being visible, speaking from his throat chakra, standing in his power. The throat is considered generally a masculine chakra. So those are examples of his masculine, heart-centered masculine expression. The feminine energy that I would say that he modeled is that connection to his heart. He was known as a powerful speaker because he spoke with such feeling. And that's the feeling is of the feminine energy. So he touched people's hearts. That's an aspect of the feminine energy. He brought people together. He didn't try to do it alone, right? So it was a community and a village, and recognizing that it was most impactful and transformative if we can bring people together to work on this together. So that would be considered a feminine energy of the gatherers, of that community, of that collective, of working together. It's not competitive, it's collaborative and cooperative. So that's another example of the heart-centered feminine energy. Another expression and opportunity, and what I think he modeled in his life example of the heart-centered feminine energy also is like his love, not just for his family, right? But he extended that love and putting himself on the line for who he considered his people. And that net was cast broader and broader as he continued his work more and more. First it was, of course, Black folks and those that were facing segregation. And he still loved, going back to love, he still loved people who said and declared that they hated him, right? And so he modeled a selflessness, which usually we associate, right, with the feminine energy, or we say sacrifice or mothers, or, putting your needs on the back burner, what you want on the back burner for the greater good. That is typically usually a feminine attribute, like the mother, right? The mother will maybe put herself in harm's way and put her young behind her between danger and her young to protect her child. And men will do that too. But generally, like that level of wanting people to benefit beyond your family, extending to your community, and having that deep love for them, that's a feminine attribute. And the masculine attribute of it is the courage to risk it, the courage to face the consequences of that loving and of that action and expression of that love. I would say, what else would I say about Dr. Martin Luther the King and how he modeled both the heart-centered masculine and the heart-centered feminine, and how they are a partnership and go together. Because we internally, in my understanding and healing journey, that it's a complementary thing. A shadow or toxic masculine complements a shadow or toxic feminine. And similarly, as we upgrade and elevate our consciousness and become more heart-centered in one aspect of ourselves, the other, to live to the fullest of our potential, has to come on board and heal and up-level itself as well. And I'll share more of my own personal journey on that later. But that is just one example of the expression of a man that both was able to love deeply and that modeled such courage, which is generally considered a masculine attribute. Oh, and one other thing I would just say is about his mental tenacity. Dr. King was so well read, so brilliant. I think he started Morehouse, I think, at 16. And a lot of his philosophy and awakening that he applied on the ground in the trenches, and the work that he was doing was from his reading. That's the intellect. So he was taking his reading and processing that in different thoughts around philosophy and humanity. And I think David Thoreau was one of the people that he enjoyed reading, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, he was inspired by Gandhi, but it was his ferocious intelligence that also supported his heart. So I'll leave you with that as an example of the heart-centered masculine and feminine. And like I said, I love and have a heart for some revolutionaries. So I'm going to get to another revolutionary tomorrow that was a female physical embodiment of both that masculine and feminine energy. And what I also want to put into context really quickly, going back to courage, and we forget about this in some ways, is that what he was doing was considered illegal. Isn't that crazy? I mean, we get it because we see the counters and all that other stuff, but the other person that I'm going to speak about tomorrow or in this next episode that was also the heart-centered masculine and feminine also was doing some illegal shit, but for the people. So I think it's an interesting thing to hold. I had this epiphany when I get to the person that I'm going to talk about tomorrow or the next episode, where I was like, wow, you know what? She was really doing some things illegal, which had a different energy at that time than how we look back at history and hold them and see them. So that's a whole other thing about that gets a little sticky, which I won't get into right now. So we're just going to wrap up. I'm just going to say and bless and thank you for listening. I bless and thank Dr. King's soul for his service, of which I have tremendously benefited, including going to a school named after him. That was a pretty positive experience. So much love, many blessings. Until the next episode, baby, be good to yourself. Peace.